Hello, welcome to today's session number 17 for this week, Wednesday's session. This is Mr. Fowler, as always, and I'm so happy that you could join me either watching this in the future or through participation in today's Zoom chat. We've got a lot of things to cover today, so I'm going to get right to it. I'm also probably going to minimize my video feed, because when I do that, I've been told I can get better, more seamless flow through the internet airwaves, or however you want to think about it, through the internet Wi-Fi, and I'll take up less bandwidth and be able to pass the savings of information on to you, the viewer. So I'm going to stop the video for a minute. You should still be able to hear me. And then I'm going to share today's session with you. All right. Hopefully you're seeing what I am seeing, which is a rundown for session 17 for today. Hopefully by the time you've either joined this meeting or you've watched this video, you are quite aware of Saba Osvath's Ready Learner 1 article. So today we want to take a look at that and sort of analyze the content in Saba Osvath's piece. And then I also want to review the argument essay prompt and pay particular attention today to phase 2. So we'll begin there. Once that's done, I want to focus on Osvath and that article in particular. Specifically, I want to ask some questions about Osvath's experiences in reading Ready Player One. That's a big part of what he writes about during his piece. And I've got some follow-up questions, specifically some questions about whether or not you, as a reader, share in his excitement for the potential of distance learning, as he describes it. Lastly, does learning that takes place within a competitive or game-like environment enhance your learning experience? These are great questions to think about and consider as we begin the process of decoding our final major article for the semester. Then, of course, you'll have a weekly discussion question, number 2 of 3 for this week, and I'll give you the last sort of 25 minutes or thereabouts of our class time, our structured class time from 9 to 10:40 in order for you to respond to that. Now, I will be honest, you may not all need 25 minutes, but it's there for you just in case. And as a reminder for next time, remember to keep reading in Ready Player One. So if you're keeping up with the reading assignments from the syllabus, that means this week you're trying to take a look at chapters 22 through 27 in Ready Player One. A few of you have already expressed the fact that you're done, that you've finished the novel. If that's the case, great. You don't have to worry about that. It's less work for you. If you haven't had a chance to finish the novel yet, or you're simply reading along with the chapter recommendations for the class, I encourage you to continue reading as we get further into the book. Okay, that's a look at what's going on today. So let's go ahead and start with that essay. Let's see. I want to share this essay. Okay. Once again, you should be seeing me here or seeing one of my, or at least hearing my voice in this page. Give me one moment. I've got an annoying phone call that keeps coming in. All right, there. That should have muted that. Apologies for the delay. In any event, we looked at this last time, so if you had a chance to watch that video, this should all be reviewed. I'm going to go through the basics a little bit more briskly in this version. So obviously, this will be due about the 25th in draft form. That's a little bit longer than you normally have for the research and writing, but since this is a longer research essay, I feel that that's only fair. The final version is due the last day of class by the end of the day. So on the 31st, I have to have everything turned in. So that's the last day that you can have to revise the draft accordingly. We'll have some in-class activities for you to complete that day, but that's the last sort of due date for this particular assignment. 100 points, 50 for the draft, 50 for the final, just like on our previous assignment, with a length of 1,250 words. Now, that's at least 4 full pages, and it may be a 5th page, a substantive amount of a 5th page, but I don't think it will be 5 full pages. So the closest, least confusing version I can explain or I can ask for it would be 5 pages. Typical format, except this time you've got to utilize 4 sources formatted with an appropriate in-text and works cited page in MLA or resources page if we're talking about an APA. Now, of those 4 sources, 2 of them have to originate from peer-reviewed journals found on electronic databases that are offered through the library access at Kishwaukee College. This will help to guarantee that you've got successful, thorough information that can be used to really underscore your main points and perspectives and offer concrete evidence that's quality in nature. So what is the assignment supposed to be about? Well, you are going to develop a thesis in direct response to one of the larger themes in this semester's reading. So essentially, folks, you are going to select one of the essays described in these prompts, A to F, or alternatively, you could propose your own topic in 5 to 8 sentences that addresses a concept from the book that you would like to write about in an extended format. Okay. So you'll develop a thesis in direct response to one of the larger themes discussed in these articles. Then you will develop a thesis with persuasive claims and support while following the structure of a college-level argument. You'll shape the assignment around your reactions to one of the concepts we've thought and written about during the semester. And your thesis will be a result of your own thinking and logic. The final draft will reflect a mastery of persuasive structure and strategies that you will apply throughout your academic and professional career. Now, like I said, I'm going relatively quickly, but we discussed this in detail last time. Using Andreessen's article, you could ask yourself, does social media affect the development of healthy self-esteem, communication skills, and social skills? You could take up the idea from the novel directly that all of the 3 principal characters, H, Wade, Samantha, have to deal with stereotypes. How do they deal with stereotypes? First of all, define that term, listing some common stereotypes that characters had to overcome. What type of defense mechanisms did these characters use to deal with these stereotypes they faced, or at least that they perceived they faced? And how were these stereotypes essentially overcome? You could talk about the idea of online games and specifically how real-world money and virtual goods are exchanged in the real marketplace as well as the virtual sphere. In response to Greengard's social games and virtual goods, you should discuss how virtual goods obtain real-world value and explore the risks and rewards of setting up a business selling these kinds of goods. Now, in chapter 19, Wade also talks about his sedentary lifestyle and describes how it is catching up with him. Start by defining the term sedentary and describe the potential health risks associated with such lifestyle choices. How does our time spent in virtual realms like the internet, video games, and television affect our physical health? How does it impact our mental health? And what can we learn about healthy choices based on Wade's approach to his own problems? E explores the idea of the environment. We know that the dystopian world in which Wade lives takes extant issues that exist in our own world and are heightened by events occurring around the time of the book's publication, 2011. Author Matthew Simmons' article, Shock to the System, explores our hunger for energy consumption today and the way it continues to spiral out of control, despite an overwhelming awareness of the cause for that issue. You could take this up and write a really good paper about how those two realities, our own reality circa 2011 and Wade's supposed dystopian future in 2045, might actually link up to one another. And then, of course, you could take today's article, Ready Learner 1, and ask yourself about virtual education. Specifically, how does the virtual education in the novel differ from today's online coursework? Which of the two teaching models do you think provides a more authentic learning environment for students? How could each of these models more closely simulate experiences in a face-to-face classroom? And is simulation of a face-to-face classroom a goal that we should even be working toward? Why do you feel the way that you do? Now, that leads us to today's discussion, phase 2. Okay, so for phase 2, I'm going to highlight that. Now that you've selected a topic, you can conduct a research evaluation for materials using Kishwaukee College's library's website. Again, you're looking for 2 suitable sources to meet the peer review journal criteria for this essay. That's 2 of 4. The other 2 can be sources that you find on your own or that fall outside of the conventional avenues of research, if you wish to be so. However, I would keep in mind that one of the 2 additional sources would be the original piece that you're reviewing or reacting to. So typically, if you think about the book and as a source and this initial article that you're responding to, you already have 2 sources. Then finding 2 more from peer-reviewed journals in the Kishwaukee College library databases should be relatively easy. However, there are a couple of things that I'd like to point out, namely that if in searching the library's materials you find a book about your topic, you should, at this point in the semester, focus your argument essay on a single chapter or section of that book as opposed to thinking about reviewing the book as a whole. That's not to discredit your abilities as a researcher. It's just to keep the idea of timeliness in the front of our minds as we prepare for this final essay project. You might not have time to read an entire additional outside text just for the purposes of a paper. Now, we're going to take a little bit of a segue here. And let's see here. So I'm going to go to the Kishwaukee College site. So one of the things that I want to do is share this source. So I'm going to go ahead and share this with you again. And right up here in the it's called the employee homepage. Now it's an employee for me because I'm an employee of the college. For you, it may say student homepage. That's okay. Right over here in the top left-hand side, you'll see a 3-bar menu list. And when you hover over that menu list, it gives you additional options. If you look at student resources, which is the 1, 2, 3, third arrow down, you can click on that, and that will reveal a link to the library. Again, that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay, 8 links down. So if we click on the library resource, so moving a little slowly, folks. We have, of course, the library links that are listed here at the bottom of the page, specifically EBSCOhost and opposing viewpoints. Now, I've detailed the use of these resources previously, but they're very user-friendly. Essentially, if you've used any kind of resource, you should be just fine maneuvering through these. However, if you'd like some specifics about how to use these resources, or if you'd just like me to provide a video showcasing the ways in which you can use these sources, just hold on, because we can do that right now. So for EBSCOhost, this is a little bit more advanced than a typical research database, but not so advanced that it should pose any real challenges to accessing it. Essentially, you might want to use EBSCOhost as opposed to, say, opposing viewpoints if you already have a good idea about what you want to write about. So hold on, I'm going to stop share for a minute, and I'm going to stop my video, and then I'm going to go back to my share screen. So here we are. No Mr. Fowler visual, but now you have the whole of EBSCOhost up and available for you. So let's say, for example, or for the sake of argument, that you are looking for a topic related to the concept of today's heading, virtual education. So let's just say you put in virtual education as a source, and let's say you did a basic search on virtual education. Pretty hot topic as of lately. As of late, not lately. So as you can see, in a basic search, you come up with 160,268 results. So right away, that's too much for you to, comprehend and focus on in one study session, right? So the first thing you're going to do is highlight the limits. You're going to want to use full text available online, and the results will update, which takes it down to 79,000, but you're also going to want to focus on scholarly journals. And that takes it down even further to 31,000. So we can also play around with our dates. 1916 is not really going to help. So let's go ahead and move the dates to about 2010. In fact, 2010's a little bit long in the tooth. But we'll see what the results are like. So not shockingly, the results did not change too much. So at this point, you do have some specific details. Now, I would throw in the words Ready Player One as they apply to our text, and we'll see if we can shrink the result list even more. Okay, so that worked really well, a little bit too well. All right, so you already have the Saba Osvath article, and then you have this piece about the annual proceedings of selected papers from the practice of educational communications and technology, and so on and so forth. I'm going to guess that that is going to cover Ready Learner 1. So now we have a different problem. We have too few results. So let's eliminate Ready Player One. And let's say, all right, virtual education. And we'll combine it with the term, I don't know, game-based learning. Let's just see if that, what that does to our results list. Okay, so now we have a very researchable amount of material. At 30 clips per page, we could, in a week or two, conceivably look through 200 results, right? Because at 30 pages a piece, you know, we're only talking about 8 pages of results to go through. Now, once you find one that you're interested in, let's say, for example, this article, number 6, is particularly interesting to you. Pedagogical change in mathematics learning, harnessing the power of digital game-based learning. Okay, it's not particularly long, looks like about 18 pages. You do have the full text. It is an academic journal. This might be a really good source. The nice thing about these sources is that both here and on opposing viewpoints, you've got quite a bit of material that you can use here. If you click on this link, let's just say, pretend you're interested in this one as an example. When it gets through sort of doing what it needs to do, if you are looking at the readout and the abstract that explains the article, you can decide whether or not it's interesting. But also over here on the far left-hand side under this tools option, you have a citation option. So for those of you working on NLA style citations or APA style citations, you just have to select the style. Here's APA, and you can copy that reference and paste it into your resources page, or our tried and true MLA, where cited page citation would also be available there for you. Okay, so that's a little bit of a rundown on how to handle all of this. Again, if you need some more help, or if you need some more information about that, don't hesitate to reach out to me. If you're just beginning the process, by contrast, you may want to start at opposing viewpoints. Now, opposing viewpoints is interesting because it gives you a wider or broader sense of the parameters involved in a particular argument. So let's say you're interested in a topic, but you really don't know what the debatable points of it are at this point. Starting with Gale and context, opposing viewpoints can clarify all that for you. Needs just a few minutes to download here. Okay. So with Gale and context, opposing viewpoints, you can simply do a basic search. Let's say, let's play it up a little bit, and we'll talk about sedentary lifestyle. Okay. Maybe I'm not spelling it correctly, but there it is. Yeah, I had a D instead of an I. Okay, let's see what they come up with. And again, the nice thing about this is that you can have a lot of different styles of initial results. 201 academic journals might be too many to plow through, but maybe you're more of an auditory learner. Maybe you'd like to listen to someone read an article about sedentary lifestyle issues. Or maybe you just want to click on the viewpoints link. There are links to videos as well, different reference materials and magazines. But if you're just looking for viewpoints, personal choices lead to a better health. Or look at this, didn't plan it, but here you go. Excessive video game playing can adversely affect children's health. That's exactly the kind of article that we're looking for that can drive interest in this particular type of essay project. And it took me just a few seconds. All right. So that's a look at our library resources. Okay, on to Saba Osvath's article. So this is Saba Osvath's article that I asked you to review for today. It is called Ready Learner 1, Creating an Oasis for Virtual Online Education, from the Journal of Language and Literacy Education in spring of 2018. So it's comparatively new. It's only about 2 years old at this point. And this one is written in APA format. So you'll have a professional example of APA as well as some professional MLA articles to review. And he begins as you should when writing a published APA paper with an abstract, which reads as follows. When the act of reading becomes a stimulus, it has the power to enact change within the reader and through readers. Adopting and using the methodological tools of autoethnography, personal narrative, and creative writing, I reflect and explore virtual and online education, prompted by a personal reading experience of Ernest Cline's science fiction novel, Ready Player One. Cline's story offers a unique vantage point, as well as rich fictional vision through which I evaluate, contrast, and reflect on my virtual education. My goal is to demonstrate how the reading experience of popular science fiction novels may shape, modify, and or inspire the development of future online education. I argue that, and this is important because even though it's an abstract, he goes ahead and states his argument or thesis point right there. And he says, I argue that reflective reading combined with readers' embodied creative acts, that is, composition of personal narratives prompted by the novel and creative writing addressing a current problem inspired by the novel's fictional reality, very similar to our own writing activities, lead to innovative ideas to foster the development of new paradigms for the creation of better online learning management systems. Thus, I present a personal narrative of reading to demonstrate how fictional works may offer relevant platforms to readers to contribute, innovate, and to advocate for change within sufficient or inadequate systems. So I think you can see perhaps at this point why I chose to leave this as the final article for the class, because at this point we too have sort of banked a whole series of thoughts along these very lines, right? We've written a narrative. Now we're going to write a research paper dealing with some of the realities that are sort of echoed or mirrored in the text. Some real world concerns that the fiction brings to bear on the characters in the novel. And of course, it does allow us to also engage in some personal narrative along the way. And then we have a picture of the author and some information on him. So he starts with this concept of why does a student read? And one of the things that I find that this article does and that helps a student access not only the concept of this novel, but sort of the concept behind the whole experiment, is this idea of the fact that everybody brings a specific and distinct reading to a text. And he begins with a story from his youth. And he explains that there's an idea of reading as a child, whether that's independently or with parents, or just as part of your school studies, that creates a distinctive type of reader within each of us. And he begins then with, after this little preview, with a question: what is reading for? And he explains that his reading life was never reduced to a form of epistemological or need-based consumption. He didn't read just because he was assigned to do so. He read out of pleasure and joy. My engagements with stories always push beyond the purely intellectual or cerebral exchanges. The last word of a story or the closing of a book rarely signal a true ending or terminus for my experience. Finishing a good book often animated and energized my body, like a mysterious plea from the authors. I was called to reimagine things, to make things, to perform creative acts, or to write new endings, new beginnings, and take on new adventures. And I think that's a really good point to start at with this novel. So right away, student reading experiences for Ready Player One usually break down into two very broad categories, right? One being that students enjoy the text to some degree or other, and they take up an aspect which they find interesting, or they engage with the text in a creative manner. The alternative to that is that, of course, students don't really enjoy the book and don't engage with it. So we're focusing then on a reader who did engage with the text. And he explains that he felt as if every story was longing for a sense of continuation and asking for contributions from him as a reader. Thus, reading or listening to a story often became a powerful stimulus to rematerialize stories outside of pages and outside of bodily confines. Consequently, the act of reading has been inseparable from the question of what should I make, literally, out of the story, or out of my encounters with characters, events, or fictional places. So that is a really interesting sort of take on how his reading process works. I'm going to skip ahead a little bit to his actual introduction to the book. Okay. I desperately try to find a reason to postpone my daily obligation of online instruction. What an interesting way to begin this discussion. I'm dreading the chair and screen-bound reality of grading for my assigned course to facilitate the seemingly endless discussion threads and reply to my students' emails, which overtake my inbox daily like an invasive species. I make a mental note that this must be the dark side of online instruction. I decide on a brief walk in the neighborhood to momentarily escape and clear my head to re-energize my body. I don't know. I feel sort of sorry for Osvath here. I love teaching online, and I love engaging with my students, but he may have several different courses with multiple students, so it may be a different experience. He reaches into the pocket of his jogging pants, pulling his headphones out, and he unknots a mess of wires. And he listens to a radio podcast in which Jim Fleming delivers lines with great excitement about Ernest Cline's book. And he decides to get an electronic form of this text and listen to it. And he explores the idea that the book takes a hold of him. And he writes that indeed, in reading Cline's text, he relives a somewhat romanticized version of my past, but it is alive and hopeful. It is as if I suddenly reestablished the flow of electric current in a severed wire that supplied the necessary energy to animate my life and disperse the looming darkness outside of the pages. Remembering and reading becomes a tonic to ease the anxiety I feel as a first-year graduate student assigned to grade for an online course. As I'm progressing with the story, I'm not only inspired, but more confident to purposely engage my students in an online environment as a helpful guide and teacher. Cline's daring vision of an immersive, highly engaging virtual world, the Oasis, makes me realize that my current situation as a novice online instructor is not just a trial by fire. It does not have to remain a dreaded, monotonous engagement with the digitized renderings of ideas, questions, and students' complaints. His story is offering both the possibility and the inspiration to transform his experiences and to advocate for change. Through the pages of the book, he witnesses that what online education could become if he refuses to remain only a consumer, a user without advocating for change. The book is like a portal transporting him into a world full of creativity and infinite possibilities. And perhaps that's why he struggles to exit the story by putting the book down. So, one of the things that his reading experience brings is a sense of creativity. He not only appreciates Cline's creativity as a writer and the ideas that he proposes within the text, but he also focuses on this idea of what potentials exist, not only for education in a broader sense, but immediately and specifically, he focuses on the idea that the Oasis seems to be a successful endeavor, at least the educational aspects of the Oasis seem to be a successful endeavor because he's really looking at the way in which it transforms the nature of education. He says that unconsciously I'm generating unrealistic expectations for any online system claiming the same name or brand, Oasis, even if my university's choice of this brand name had nothing to do with Cline's novel. He just can't help it. His mind's primordial default setting for finding patterns and connections cannot erase the newfound hopes and expectations related to the university's online teaching and learning platform. He longs for an oasis similar to the one in the novel, where virtual education is filled with adventure and excitement. So one of the things I really wanted to reach out to you today and discuss with you is whether or not you feel a sense of adventure. You feel a sense of excitement, not necessarily with online learning, but have you ever had an experience like that? A lot of people feel that this may be one of the best ways to engage students going forward as a society. If you look at some of the traditional systems associated with education, you may have ask yourself a few additional questions. One of the questions that has long been associated with the failure of traditional school systems are things related to timing. I am often reminded of an episode of Family Guy where Peter Griffin makes a joke about the fact that school starts at 7:45 for some reason. Now, if this seems funny to you, or, then you're in the same boat that I am. I live in a very rural community, and 7:45 school start time is pretty atypical. It's typical of my brother, who was 16 years older than me, and all of my other older siblings. My closest sibling was 9 years older than me. And again, this is what happens. And now I have nieces and nephews, and their experiences are also quite similar. But why 7:45? Well, if you think about it, 7:45 is 15 minutes before 8 o'clock. So that allows a little bit of time at the beginning of each day for students to get organized, for administrative issues to be attended to before the start of 8 a.m. school day. Now, 8 a.m. school day usually ran from 8 to about 2:30, give or take. And after 2:30, you had to give adequate time to bus any students home who did not have a vehicle or who did not live within walking distance of the school system. So that meant you had to provide at least an hour. So if school ends at 2:30 and you have to have an hour of transit time, you're really looking at a 3:30 end of the day, which enables students to get home and theoretically begin their work before their parents get home around 6 o'clock. That's assuming a 30-minute transit time after their workday typically ends around 4:30 or 5. There is a break in the day for lunch, provided usually in a cafeteria-like setting, and the instructional times are usually broken down to 1 hour or 40 minutes if you're on a traditional schedule. If this sounds at all familiar to you, that's because it is. Most of the standard American school day and its structure were derived from conversations that student administrators had in the 1920s with factory owners. Because America was a very industrialized country, it still is, but in the 1920s, it relied on manufacturing. And that's not just circumstantial. The fact that the traditional school day mirrors the traditional work day is no accident. It's planned that way because effectively, whether or not you did well in school was really of little interest to people who ran factories. What they were hoping teachers and the educational system could provide was a systemized, detailed worker, so that if you had gone through 12 years of training, train your mind, your body, your metabolism, to adjust to a typical 6 to 8 hour workday, you would be a better, more docile factory worker. But what has happened is that as our economy has changed, the need for this traditional school day and its design has come into question, and understandably so. For example, one of the key things is the start time. If you begin your school day at 8 o'clock, most of the time, especially during your formative teenage and adolescent years, you're counting yourself short of sleep during the time in which your body needs the most rest to grow and define itself effectively. So a better system for a school day would be around 9 a.m. So you would, in theory, under the best circumstances, just be waking up when this typical American school day begins. And then you would theoretically have breakfast before you traveled to the school. And then the school day would probably only go until 1 o'clock. That's including a short lunch still. So that, again, is a system that we see working in various Scandinavian countries very well. But it's not a really good one-to-one ratio to just assume what would work well in most Scandinavian countries would suddenly work well in the United States. We're very different cultures. There are very different needs that the school system provides in the United States that are simply not called upon for the school systems in these other various countries to address. So a virtual education or a virtual online experiment is not quite what Osvath was considering when he wrote this article, but now in the wake of COVID-19, we've had one semester, the spring semester of a traditional American high school year, interrupted and replaced, or at least enhanced by online learning. And now we have a great backlash against something we've only spent a very few months attempting. So if you think about the time in which that occurred, COVID only started in, say, March of 2020, and it started making a major impact in March. So right around spring break. So let's say half of March, that's 2 weeks. April is 4 weeks. And May for our high school seniors was probably only an additional 2 weeks, 4 for everyone else. So let's take it as the max, that'd be 4, 8, 10. Even if you wanted to assume all of March was given over to COVID for some reason, that would only be 12 weeks. So in 12 weeks, we decided that by and large, we did not like online education. I would argue that that's probably not enough time to make a true assessment of how effective online education is. However, a lot of schools have already made a decision to abandon this in favor of face-to-face teaching. I really doubt that this will actually come to fruition for a full semester and be effective. In addition to concerns related to COVID, I feel that we really need to give online education a real thorough chance before we abandon it. And I know that several districts are planning on a 50-50 split between traditional classroom educational experiences and something online. So thinking about this concept no longer just appears as a novelty related to our text, but is actually a real world concern. The acronym of the OASIS, which stands for the Ontologically Anthropocentric Sensory Immersive Simulation, developed by his fictional geniuses James Halliday and Ogden Morrow, define the OASIS as an open source reality, a malleable online universe anyone could access via the internet using their existing home computer or video game console. You could log in and instantly escape the drudgery of your day-to-day life. And Osvath writes that this free and open access virtual world offers an engaging virtual learning experience to anyone who's willing to learn and acquire skills and content, specific knowledge in countless domains. The OASIS public school system on the virtual planet Ludus is a grand place of learning with polished marble hallways, cathedral-like classrooms, zero-G gymnasiums, and virtual libraries containing every school board approved book ever written. The OASIS also allows for users to freely create and alter their digital selves in order to foster equity and fairness within its digital confines. These are some of the elements that Osvath finds exciting and engaging about the OASIS. And I would say that those elements are exciting and engaging to a lot of prospective readers, myself included. But Osvath is quick to point out that when you juxtapose Klein's oasis with the experiences of online virtual education in the early 21st century, he says that he feels both a longing and tension that require creative interventions. Since his time reading Ready Player One coincided with his engagement with online education, he could not stop or quell his inquiry in what ways Klein's Ready Player One might shape or influence the future of online education. So he says that in many ways, that the oasis is tied to the idea of memory and imagination. He says that the oasis itself is like our imagination, a collection of accessible but immaterial entities that have potential to morph the physical world around us. Thus, Klein, Weissel, and Botten offer an invitation to actively remember and explore our treasured memories in order to create meaning, to offer at least a refuge for all those who may encounter us throughout the time we live, or through stories, or through the writings that we share or leave behind. And this is one very interesting aspect of the entire novel, is that a lot of work that is asked of students to, for completion is memory-based. It's not necessarily an authentic learning experience as much as it is a test of one's memory. So this raises an additional question in the text. So what is valuable about a memory, and how does memory function or serve the learner in the learning process? He says, as I progressed with the reading, I often found it impossible to stop the flow of memories and their powerful spell to relive and re-explore my own past. Klein's references to the 80s reawakened my own memories of those years of young adulthood. These memories then coalesced into new narratives, offering a new set of tools, methods, and paradigms, sustaining my search for answers and for solutions in my own present, namely, at least, to imagine a better future for online education. So Osvath continues writing for a while, talking about his frustrations as an online instructor, and he proposes that the current infrastructure for online learning does not support anything even rudimentary like the Oasis, and that is a failure of today's online education experience. Near the end of his article, he focuses on the Oasis as an invitation to create. And he explains that good fiction empowers readers to bring forth change in the world in which they live. And a good story has the potential to inspire creations to construct bridges or pathways from an insufficient present toward an imagined future, where the fiction of today can become tomorrow's reality. So I think that this is a very interesting article and raises some really good questions. I'm not going to read the entire thing for you. Hopefully, if you are interested in this, this analysis will have piqued your own interests, and it will compel you forward to your own reading. So essentially, I would ask you to consider, do you think his experiences match with your own? Do you share his excitement for the potential of distance learning? And do you think that learning takes place within a competitive, more game-like environment would enhance your learning experience? Has it done so before? That's something that I would be curious to hear more about. So I'm going to make this a little bit of a shorter session for today. I hope that you found Osvath's ideas somewhat engaging, and I hope that this helps you to propel or to self-propel your thoughts and ideas toward a arguable position on one or more of the topics that we've discussed over the course of the last few weeks. At the very least, I hope that this gives you a different perspective or encourages you to think about the nature of online education, not only what we're doing in this class or what I'm attempting to help us do in this class, but also thinking about this book, not merely as something that you just read for the semester for the kooky teacher who assigns it, but to think about this text and other future texts that you might read as an invitation to extend the educational process. Meaning, folks, that you will get more out of a text, more out of a class experience, no matter what that class is focused on, if you deeply engage with the text and you take the extant ideas and begin to have a conversation outside of the reading experience. Deeper probative reading will often result in a more substantive, meaningful exchange of information. At least that's what my theory is. So this is Mr. Fowler signing out for today. I wish you a pleasant day and an even better tomorrow. Take care, everyone.